All right, so we got Bernie went on top playing Esper Reanimator, our unfair player, and Henry Treadway in the bottom playing Merfolk. I haven't seen Merfolk in Modern in quite a while, have you?
It's been a while, yeah. It has. It always pops up here and there. People that are diehards, they love the deck, but it hasn't really gotten any new cards, really. You know, I mean, this is a deck that does play 4 Harbinger of the Seas in the main. That's probably the newest edition, and I think that's going to be Henry's main game story of the tournament is if Harbinger's a good card, this is going to be a good deck.
Sounds good. All right, so Bernie's off to the races here with the Surveil land, of course, very powerful in the Esper deck if you get a little lucky on your Surveils. And we're going to see Henry here with a turn 1, I believe this is a Mind Spring Merfolk, an Aether Drift Exhaust Merfolk that can draw some cards and get a little bit bigger.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. That's not the 1-mana Merfolk I really would have expected. You know, we're not seeing any of the 3-mana, 3/4 indestructible Merfolk. I forgot the name of it. But, you know, that's a card that was in a lot of these Merfolk lists. No copies in Henry's list.
Well, it's gone. To the graveyard.
Gone.
Sole purpose in life is sacrifice to Flare Denial.
Yes.
Psychic Frog, get out of here. Not a Merfolk. Frog. Don't like frogs here. So we see Archaeologist come down for Bernie. Put over some more cards. Tainted Indulgence. Frog. No big whammy, right? Looking for that big boy to put in the graveyard.
Yep, exactly. No gigantic creature yet. And, yeah, I believe Falaji, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that is only 3 cards. So there was that 4th card flipped over here, so the judge is going to intervene, more than likely. A minor dexterity problem. Probably get a warning here on Bernie's side, and we'll kind of move on from here.
Yeah, I believe Thunder Trap Trainer, the very similar Bloomberg card, is 4 cards, not 3, right?
Yes, there you go.
That's tough. Steel Ponder Brainstorm problem.
100%.
You know,
yeah.
where, I resolve this cantrip, not that cantrip in Legacy. Whoops.
That was what your opponents were doing, right? Because you were only casting goblins?
Yes. Yes, indeed, actually. Don't look at me, Judge. I have a 1/1 goblin in play.
Exactly.
And a Mirage basic mountain. So
Thriving.
Yeah.
Thriving.
Oh, absolutely. So we're going to solve this issue here. We're going to find the right ruling as far as what's the procedure here. Probably just going back in the deck and getting shuffled.
Yep. So, funny story, you know, I played Breach for a very, very long time, but before that, my deck of choice was Esper Reanimator. I think this deck is incredibly powerful. It's, you know, extremely fun to play as well, and this was all before Psychic Frog. Psychic Frog in this deck is just absolutely unbelievable. When it's in play, of course, it's going to do the normal Frog things, draw that extra card. You're able to discard one of the giant creatures like an Atraxa that you draw, and also it's very good up against the hate that you might run into, like Surgical Extraction. You're able to exile the card that your opponent goes to Surgical. You know, you still wouldn't be able to bring it back with Goryo's Vengeance, anything like that, but it still would negate that effect. So Psychic Frog just truly does it all, bridging the gap in the games where you don't have the absolute best draw that you can of Goryo's on 3, Ephemerate it type thing.
Yeah, and whenever you have a deck that has a card like Psychic Frog, doing all these wonderful things, and then it's also just like one of the best creatures in the entire format. That is the mark of a good deck.
Yeah.
Super high card quality with synergy. So looks like we're all cleaned up here with this Archaeologist. And Bernie's going to pass back to, are we playing Standard here?
Hey, we sure are. Absolutely. I mean, that's a lot of cards from the recent sets for sure.
Flood Pit Drowner coming down. Going to try and stun this Archaeologist.
Love it.
Bernie's going to respond with a fetch. Maybe a little blinking action going to happen here. Should be quite good for Bernie's set as far as setup goes.
And I will say, you know, I mean, it's always difficult for me to evaluate a Merfolk deck in general because, well, you know, it does get played, but it doesn't win a lot of major tournaments. You know, here and there it'll spike. So it's always interesting to see how good of a chance a Merfolk deck really has. But if there's going to be any kind of matchups where it's going to be great, it's going to be in a matchup like this where your opponent has to resolve a 2-mana spell when you have a lot of interaction for it.
Yeah, when your creatures are not quite up to the Boros energy snuff, but your interaction is so good. That's where Merfolk lives. So, and now we see Harbinger of its Hide. So heads up play from Bernie there, fetching that Plains. And Harbinger comes down. We turn all these non-basic lands into islands, Mutavault included. And here comes the Harbinger for just a little check attack. Hey.
Oh, yeah. A little. You going to block this?
You awake over there, Bernie? Or? So back to the upkeep. We see a flashback of Ephemerate, or the rebound ability, excuse me. Going to be on the Archaeologist. Going to bin that Atraxa, which, of course, is kind of step one, right? Step one. Now the hardest step of them all is there is only one swamp in Bernie's list, and you need black mana to do the thing. You need black mana to pretty much... I mean, I'm looking at the creatures now. Besides just, like, playing Solitudes and blinking it out there, you're really not doing anything without black mana. So, as great as the play... Is that the swamp? That looks pretty swampy. Wow. Okay. Forget everything I just said. Bernie's mana base is perfect, played flawlessly, and is probably ready to go. Got that basic Lantron in play, and quite the motley crew of lands there. But, yeah, that's a big deal, you know. And Harbinger Overseas is a card that is going to have a major impact on a lot of these matchups, barring either prefetching the swamp or just naturally just drawing it. Yeah, you got to think, you know, Bernie probably had that in hand. Otherwise, we would have been fetching it a little aggressively. But here's the thing. This is not an open deckless day at this event. So you don't know your opponent has 4 Harbingers. So I would assume that's much better news for Henry, as you would get some free wins here normally if your opponent didn't already naturally draw the one of. Yeah, and that's an important thing because, you know, a lot of our RCs lately have all been open deckless. Yes. I think that there's a real skill to kind of having a feel for what your opponent could have, you know. Yeah. You know, or you're looking at the range of cards they have in hand, but, like, they're deckless too. Having a feel for knowing the things that, you know, the monsters in the closet kind of thing too. Yeah. So we see Lord of Atlantis come down here and attack, of course, Harbinger because of Merfolk itself. So a nice little synergy beat down here. Passing back to Bernie. And Bernie looks like we got that Gora's Vengeance. There we go. It's Atraxa time, 10 cards, and now no matter what, we're going to get a hit. You know, so you're going to be able to gain yourself some life, buy some time, get some cards. Now it's the Ephemerate number 2 check. If you can get that, game's probably over. Yeah, don't look like we see that one there. We see 2 Solitudes, Thoughtseize, Tainted Indulgence, Grizzlebrand. There's a Frog in there also. Now, of course, even though the swamp has been found, a little bit limiting to only have 1 black source. Yeah, limiting, but, you know, you really do only need the one. You know, I mean, if you're needing to double Gorios on a turn, you can probably wait and still win the game pretty handily by waiting a turn. But, yeah, definitely is slightly limiting. All right, so picking out these cards. Looks like Solitude, Thoughtseize, Land, Tainted Indulgence. And I guess mostly all the options, right? Oh, there's a bunch of creatures here. We got Solitude, Grizzlebrand, and Frog. Yep, 4 cards. You know, most of the time, this deck isn't caring about being the best Atraxa hitting deck ever, where you're trying to get 6 cards, get some Planeswalkers in there, although some lists have played Teferi, Time Raveler in the past. But it is just good enough when you can do this. Hit 7, and now is the test. Is the Ephemerate there? Because that's the true combo. You're going to get to spin again. You're going to get to look at 10 more cards and keep your Atraxa around. This is what this Esper Reanimator deck is all about. Yeah, the Ephemerate, without that, this is a one-shot deal. Yeah. So keeping Atraxa in play is a big deal. Although it's important to note, you know, Merfolk, Lord of Atlantis gives Island Walk. Yeah. You know, and historically, the Merfolk decks being good against the combo decks, good against the blue decks in Legacy and stuff like that, is probably due to that. But looks like no Ephemerate. So there goes Atraxa. Get out of here. And that is still a pretty healthy attack force on Henry's side. So back over to Henry in a draw for turn. And the one thing I will say from Bernie's list, like, sure, you know, you need to fetch those basics out aggressively, but you do still have 3 Solitudes and maybe a 4th in the board, which I'm assuming is going to come in against the 4 Harbinger deck, where even if you can't piece together any white sources or black sources with the basics, you can still Solitude Harbinger. So not the worst news here for Bernie. All right, so here comes the Drowner and the Harbinger, which are both 3 power and Island Walk. Lord does not give Island Walk to itself, so it's going to stay home in the face of the Archaeologist on defense. Noting also the Mutafault is an island as well, so not available. And we're going to see Solitude. We're going to see Cancel. Flare of Denial being hard cast to eat that Solitude. Pretty good exchange for Henry. Yeah, absolutely. And back Bernie's way. Bernie at 12. And the clock's ticking. This is a 2-turn clock. Yeah, and Bernie didn't hit another Gorios off the Atraxa. Like, that's all you're looking for is, like, I want a Gorios, or I want an Ephemerate, or I want another Gorios to do it again. Looks like we might have already had it wrapped up as 2 mana is tapped here.
And I believe we saw, okay, Emperor of Bones, not quite as good. This card's a little bit more manageable, but over the course of 2 turns, we'll still get something powerful back, like a Gristlebrand.
Yeah, the lack of black mana here hurting for sure,
Definitely.
Also that this thing can't block.
Nope.
We got islands in play, so the 2-turn clock is still available, but Emperor is quite powerful if the game goes on.
And we'll see what we select. I want to say there was a Gristlebrand in the graveyard. I'm not 100%. I didn't see it as Bernie was going through it. But even if there was, this is the order you want to do it. You want to first put Solitude under it, and then put Gristlebrand the turn you're going to activate it. Because if this Emperor were to die with the Gristlebrand under it, it's just gone. So
here come the Merfolk for the attack. How about Harbinger number 2? All right, so unlocking the Harbinger via Solitude. No longer an option, and now there is a 9 Island Walk power in play. Okay. So going Bernie's way. Bernie draws for turn, and has quite a few options here.
Yeah, we'll see. If Gristlebrand is indeed in the yard, that seems like where I'm going to start. You get in there for 7, go up to 13, draw 7 cards, and try to find something. But that is not even a foolproof plan either. Like Atraxa would actually be better to get right now if we had it. Maybe we just do not.
All right, so we see an adapt here on the Emperor Bones. That puts Solitude into play temporarily. A little bit of attack, a little bit of lifelink. Lord Atlantis to get out of here. So some life for Henry. And then most importantly, these Merfolk are back down to size and no longer have Island Walk.
Yep. That is very big, as now the battlefield from Bernie is just better. Just a stronger battlefield. So Henry really needs to find another way to give his creatures Island Walk, which there are a lot of. There's 3 Lords and 4 Master of the Pearl Tridents to be able to get Island Walk going once again.
Yeah, so now we can see blockers actually mattering. So yep. Emperor Bones is a 4/4, Archaeologist is a 1/4, and kind of a sad pass back for Henry here. Just a couple of 2/2s in play, and a great start, but Bernie now has the opportunity to get things going. So here comes Emperor again, attacking in for 4. Bernie going on the offensive.
Poor fish.
And looks like we're over Henry's way, so Bernie just passing.
Okay, just a flashed in 3/2. It's not countering anything.
All right, so doesn't go to turn, goes for the Tiebinder aggro play, just getting in there, draws for turn. And how about a little tricky, actually. Let's get tricky. Merfolk Trickster coming to play. Can tap down a creature, and I do count 9 power in play.
Yeah, that Emperor of Bones attack was a little greedy. I mean, we'll see what Bernie has. There's got to be something. But, wow, if this is just the game here, you got to think Bernie is going to want that Bones back. But, yeah, Fatal Push, anything to be able to interact.
All right, so pushing down the only available target, the Floodbit Drowner. 7 damage comes across, puts Bernie down to 2. Yeah, that was an aggressive attack, right?
Yeah, way too aggressive, I would think. But once again, you don't know the cards that are in your opponent's deck here on day 1. So, you maybe forget about this one.
Merfolk Trickster. Not hard to forget.
Yeah. The first time you get tricked out, you feel it.
The second time, fool me twice and so on. So here's Otherworldly Gaze from Bernie. Going to look at the top few cards here. Get some surveilling on. Some cards to the bin. No card to hand. This is just looking at the top view manipulating. Surveil 3.
Very common card in Dredge when that was a popular deck.
Yep. And needs to find something here. We got, this is just it's like a limited game, right?
It really is.
We got 4 2/2s in play or whatever, and only 2 blockers, and Bernie's at 2. So.
Yeah, and just think if that Emperor stayed back. Bernie is at 4. There's 1 less creature, and this looks manageable.
All right, so an immediate flashback on Gaze as well. I assume this is in the upkeep.
Yep.
Trying to manipulate the draw for Bernie's turn. And this is a definite desperation play, right?
Definitely. Trying to find a Gorios Vengeance, trying to find a creature to bring back and win the game. I would say even if you could bring back a frog or something and jump it there, but it is not how Gorios Vengeance works.
Frog feels legendary.
It does feel legendary, yeah.
But it is a Psychic Frog, not the Psychic Frog.
Yeah. Does work with Emperor, but we've already adapted, so you can't do that again.
All right. Tough spot for Bernie here. You can tell that really in the squeeze. You know, we're in the upkeep, just manipulating cards a little bit. Sensei's Divining Top style almost.
Yeah.
It's not like we're drawing cards here. So
that's 3 cards though. Okay, that looks like we were already past the upkeep. So this was mill. I probably already have the card, you know, Goryo's Vengeance, but didn't find any hit besides Ketramos, which can attack.
Yep. Tainted just not going to find the answer. And yeah.
Yep.
The Merfolk beatdown gets there, and in surprising fashion, right? I mean,
very much so.
The Island Walk plan was smooth. When that got turned off, it felt like, oh no.
Yeah.
There's some tutus in play. So, all right. So, Merfolk takes on game number 1 here on Bernie's side. We see in the sideboard 4 Consignment Memory, 1 Fatal Push, 1 Fracture, 1 Catcher Most, 2 Mystical Dispute, 1 Prismatic Ending, 1 Solitude, 1 Spell Snare, 1 Thoughtseize, and 2 Wrath of Disguise. There are a lot of good options here.
Yeah, a lot of good cards, you know, and here's the thing that's kind of awkward. Normally, the card that says counter target blue card for 1 mana is excellent, and it still probably will be good, the Mystical Dispute. But Merfolk is an Aether Vial deck, so that's always kind of the brutal, you know, pull that Aether Vial decks put you in. It's like if they don't have the Vial, these counter spells are amazing and I'd want them, but if they do, it ends up being less than exciting. Fatal Push is going to be excellent. Wrath of the Skies looks really good to me. Bring in some more Thoughtseize if you want, 1 more Solitude. It's going to be a question of how many cards do you want to take out, and I see like some Force Negations in the main that I'd want to get out. The Ketramos doesn't look that good to me. I'd probably be taking that one out. So basically anything that destroys a creature early on, and then I'd be very much prioritizing getting my basics.
All right, and then on Henry's side, we got 3 Chalice of the Void, 3 Consignment Memory, 2 Dismember, 2 Harbinger of the Tides, 2 Spreading Seas, and 3 Stern Scolding. And looks like less tools here for Henry, right?
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything too exciting. Maybe the Stern Scolding actually looks okay. It's good against about half of Bernie's deck. It's the fact that you can hit the Frog, you can hit the Solitudes, you can hit the Emperor of Bones, which might be enough, but you can't beat the, hey, I just tainted Indulgence on 2, put an Atrax in my yard, then Goryo's Vengeance into Ephemerate. So it's no catch-all, be-all, but it is good against half the deck.
All right, so let's we got game 2 coming up here in a moment, but first, Flash. We got a flash sale for you, folks, on StarCityGames.com. 10% off promotional singles.
Ooh,
Some little fancy cards here, huh? What are your thoughts on fancy cards?
You know, I'm a fan, except what is that? What is that? Is that Delayed Fire Blast?
Delayed Blast Fireball.
Delayed Blast. Okay.
That's a.
It looks like that. Yes, that looks pretty nice. That's a little Zelda action, right?
It's something 8-bit something. Yeah, that's a vintage cube card. Pretty good one too.
Okay.
But flash sale ends on Monday. 10% off promotional singles. Check them out at StarCityGames.com.
I like them to an extent. There are some that are not my favorite, but you know, and there are a lot of them that look really, really cool.
Good stuff.
As long as they look like a Magic card. That's my big concern.
That's a big one for me too as well. So, all right. So we do have actually that is a classic. Star City Games Open Series deck box.
Is that a silhouette of you winning the Players Champ?
I wasn't going to say anything.
It is, right?
I'm not sure, honestly.
Oh, okay.
But I think that was pre-SCG Tour. Yeah. That was way back in the day. I have one of those, but it's like whited out.
That's a classic. It could be you type deck box.
Yep.
If you were born way earlier and played on the Star City Games Tour back in the day.
It was pretty cool. I think it was Thursday on the big sign outside the convention center. They just used one of the old Star City Open Series graphics. So they didn't update. They just assumed that Star City again, whatever. So they didn't have a Spotlight Series stuff on it. And I was like, I know they're gonna be mad about that, but that's pretty cool.
Yes.
All right.
You played a lot back in the day. I didn't play as much as I lived in North Dakota. The series did not frequent Fargo, North Dakota very often. I don't know. I put in my complaints, but I believe Patrick said something about it on air one time. I don't remember exactly. It was something if you live in a place like Fargo, North Dakota. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to check the replay.
Yeah, we'll have to go back on that one for
sure.
sure.
We'll have to check, yeah.
So let's look a little mulligan here on Henry's side. Now, kind of looking at Bernie's sideboard, it almost feels like Bernie can become a pseudo-control deck, right?
Yeah, it looks like it with Ketramos, with a bunch of Thoughtseizes. You can just go Thoughtseize into Frog into Ketramos, and all of a sudden you have to deal with that mid-range plan, and then the combo still has the ability to kind of creep its head in whenever. So that is why I love this Esper Reanimator deck. It feels like it's the mold of the type of decks I always love to play. Something that is a really over-the-top powerful deck as your plan A, but your plan B can get there. Because what that does, it puts a squeeze on your opponent when they're sideboarding. If you lose to the combo, it's a common thing that players will sideboard overly against just the combo. And then you zig and you beat them with plan B. And, those kind of decks just really get a lot of value just from, the presence of having a plan A in your deck. It ends up being exactly the style of Magic I want to play.
All right, well, Corey, you kind of called it here, right? So you said Aether Vial, good against counter spells, also 2 Cavern of Souls of us as well.
Yep.
Turn 1, Mindspring Merfolk once again for Henry, and if there's a dispute in hand for Bernie, sorry, can't counter that one.
Doesn't matter, yep.
All right, so we got a Surveil on Bernie's side, and the Mindspring Merfolk is, it's a card that can draw cards, but it's not exactly a beatdown machine.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's pretty slow. It is not doing that very aggressively. So that is an interesting one for me. I will be happy to be wrong when we see this do some good work, but it feels like a lot has to go right for this one.
Oh, I imagine more for the fair matchups, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
For the grindy matchups, if you will.
Yes, so kind of a nightmare scenario for Henry here in turn 2 Psychic Frog. And there are not a lot of ways to get this thing out of the way in the mono blue Merfolk deck.
No, usually some dismembers in the board, but that's even if your opponent doesn't have enough cards. If they have 7 cards, there's a solid chance they're okay discarding 4 of them because, hey, 2 of them might be like Gristlebrands and Atraxas where you already want to get them in there. So
a little more mono blue land destruction here in this Tide Shaper, which I believe is turning the backstreet into an island. Kind of a cool little way to disrupt,
Yep.
All right, Delta comes down for Bernie.
Would have been a lot better if we were, on the play doing that. I guess it was a fetch land, so it wouldn't have really done anything anyways. But
and here comes the frog. The frog. Such a hard card. You can't block it. It's hard to kill. And then once that first hit happens, what's that feel like, Corey?
It feels like it's over.
Yeah.
It truly feels like it's over already. One of the most powerful card, that we saw from Modern Horizons 3, and that's saying a lot because there was a lot of really good ones, but there just hasn't been a great home. The Dimir, mid-range decks, they're okay. They're nothing amazing, especially in a combo world where a lot of stuff's going over the top. Urza Saga is pretty good against those style of decks, but Frog in this deck is perfect. So I'm a big fan of Esper Reanimator as a deck choice right now.
All right, so going Henry's way. Henry draws for turn, plays an Otawar as a land. Very important that Cavern of Souls is marked as Merfolk to avoid any confusion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of a light attack here for 3. The Tide Shaper does get bigger when your opponent has an island.
There are a lot of wizards. There's only 2 Merfolks here that are not wizards as well. Okay, never mind. There's 3, but it could be wizard.
Are there any wizards that are not Merfolks?
No.
All right.
There are not.
Well, Cavern of Souls is an island now anyway, so here comes the Harbinger. And we're going to see a fetch and response from Bernie. Imagine pulling out a basic land of some type.
That backstreet is now a double island.
Yep, so islandy.
Yeah, it is the most island.
All right, there's basic swamp. And swamp, the more important of the 2 non-blue duels, right?
I would have to agree. Yes, I would definitely have to agree. I think being able to get back a powerful creature is more important than being able to ephemerate it. And because that's the thing, if you can get back an Atraxas, you can get back a Gristlebrand, you can probably find a Solitude, Yeah.
The fact that the primary white card does not require white mana is certainly a big one.
Yeah.
All right, so here's a Tainted Indulgence end step from Bernie. Going to draw 2 cards. Have to discard 1, unless you have like a bunch of types or mana cost or which is not the case. So.
And sometimes that's a disadvantage. When you have those types, you're like, dang it, I need to discard.
Right.
Not when you have a frog. Usually doesn't matter, but.
Yes, it is a pretty amusing little anti-synergy there.
Yeah.
Doesn't come up too often, but. And we see it on tap, and again, you immediately, as soon as Bernie untaps, you feel the pressure of his frog.
Yeah.
It's not too long before it's going to get into the red zone, and just a squeeze.
Yeah, Frog against the mono blue deck just seems like everything I want to do if I'm Bernie. I wouldn't say aggressively mulligan because, you don't want to go too crazy on it, but I would be decently aggressively mulliganing to a Frog, especially when I'm on the play. Now, there are some counter spells, the Stern Scoldings that can answer it, but outside of that, it's just going to live. It's just going to live. You can tap it down with a Drowner. You can tap it down with a Trickster to buy some time. Eventually, the frog's going to eat, though. There'll be flies aplenty that it will be gobbling up.
Or fish.
Or fish, yeah.
Yeah, so coming in, we see some discards here and some cards, more cards drawn. Here's Archaeologist as well. That's the thing about Frog, too, is sort of like, oh, get a little pause here. Okay. And, you know, the
ding, ding, ding. We hit.
Oh, that is the whammy, yep.
Yeah, that is, I mean, that was after an attack, though. So, you know, like there is that stuff that's going on here that we're not going to attack with Gristlebrand. So that leads me to believe that Bernie just found the Archaeologist off that.
Yeah, and then the post-combat Frog is a pretty good consolation prize, right?
Not too bad.
All right, so
now looks like we might be hopping our way into a third game.
Yep, so offensively, Henry is a little behind here. Also defensively, so a lot to kind of get through. You know, real motley crew of Merfolk in play right now. And, you know,
yeah.
There's definitely a disparity in these decks between the raw power level of the cards, right?
Yes. Yeah, and I would say normally it's like, yeah, what you lack in raw power from Merfolk, you gain in synergy, but these frogs are not only powerful, but they're very synergistic in the deck as well. So I can't get over enough how much I think Frog is amazing, but not that great in these mid-range style decks, you know, like just Dimir, just Grixis type thing, but really just perfect in this list.
All right. Looks like we're back Bernie's way, and it's a bit dicey for Henry here, you know, not being able to get that offense in. You know, definitely somewhat reliant on the Island Walk effects to actually be able to attack.
Yeah, very much so. And now it looks like these frogs are going to start jumping. Only jumps the one. The other one's large enough where Bernie is willing to interact in some way. But, hey, if Henry does have a Dismember here and you're able to maybe just triple block the one frog, see how far Bernie's going to go with it, maybe you really can get something going. But the fact that Bernie's drawing 3 cards a turn here, you know, Bernie's ahead on life cards, battlefield, land advantage, like every metric that we track in a game, Bernie is ahead on.
Psychic Frog's going to make you jump. All right, so damage going through. The sizing, too, on the frogs is crazy. You know, obviously, Psychic Frog is a riff off of Psychotog, classic old card. That had a temporary buff. The permanent buff, just turning cards into sizing, is just incredible.
So incredible. And to age myself, that was, you know, the first deck that was like a tier 1 deck that I lost to was Psychic Frog Upheaval Shenanigans. So that was, there it is. Look at that beautiful monster.
Oh,
man.
That toothy grin.
Yes, absolutely love it. Whenever I got all my stuff upheavaled and then this frog was, or this Atog was still hanging around, I was very sad 12-year-old, but
yes, the year was 1942.
Yes, I got picked up by my mom. I cried. I said, "Would you believe it? They made me pick up everything, Mom. Not cool."
All right, so we see an end-step Mind Spring activation, which draws some cards and puts a counter on every Merfolk. So a little synergy there, which is kind of cool. And we see an attack. You know, the Archaeologists are both 0-3s, and now we have 2 3-power Merfolk coming in. But, you know, I think we need a little more on Henry's side. So chump block. I kind of like that one, right? In the face of possible, they might not be able to block later.
Yeah, exactly. Get your blocks in while you can. As, sure, you're holding back the 2-2 right now. I would have liked to see Henry get in with that 2-2 as well, though. As, you know, you're not really expecting any kind of blink effect that's you're going to lose your Merfolk on. And if that happens, then you at least get in some damage. It probably would have yielded in the 2-2 being blocked and an Archaeologist hanging around, but then 3 damage got through.
Yep. So frogs here, deciding who's playing offense, who's playing defense. The smaller frog is going to get in.
Okay. That's Bernie showing a little bit of, a little bit of being afraid here.
Trepidation on Bernie's side. Maybe a little reeling back to that last game where that Emperor Bones got a little too frisky.
Far too frisky. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so, and now it's on Henry. You know, it's chump blocking a frog, denying a card on a chump block. How does that weigh into your chump blocking equation?
It matters when I'm doing something extremely powerful and over the top. Like, let's say I'm about to combo next turn. But at this stage, it's like, what's the difference between 7 and 8 cards here? I think at some point, Henry is going to have to deal with these frogs, of course, but I don't think it's right now.
All right, well, we have a temporary solution here in Harbinger of Atiya. Just to get paid 2 extra mana for and flashed in. This can bounce a tapped creature. Now, plus side here is bouncing the attacker. The downside here is that Bernie can recast this thing on defense.
Yep, can recast it, but when you're stuck under all these islands where that's your only thing you get to cast, and who knows, maybe Henry has a Flare of Denial, something like that. So that plays great. Those came in from the sideboard. And they look incredible. I wasn't sure if that was going to come in. It doesn't seem great against the Reanimate plan, but definitely good against the frogs.
Yeah, you got to have some kind of plan for these frogs.
Yeah.
So of course, mono blue next to the Fatal Push, Solitude, and so on and so forth. So we see an island from Bernie, and you're right. Bernie's going to pass the turn not using the black mana on a frog, so clearly saying, I've got something else I want to do.
So I think this is what Bernie is setting up. Recognizing that, this game's went pretty long. Henry's done a lot of nothing on certain turns, so probably has a good amount of interaction. So what I would be thinking Bernie's doing is end step Goryo's Vengeance, gets countered, Bernie's main phase, second Goryo's, lining up something like that to be able to have a Gristlebrand attacking and hopefully pick up the game through that.
And this is kind of predicated on the fact that Bernie's at 15. Right,
yeah.
The clock for Henry is not particularly impressive, so Bernie has a little more time to kind of set up these kind of things, right?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, this clock is getting a little scary. One Island Walker, and we're going.
Sure.
We are truly going places. So, hey, speak of the devil.
All right, there it is.
Speak of the fish.
That is Master of the Pearl Trident. 2/2 that gives Island Walk and buffs the squad, and you're right. This would be a lot of Island Walking damage if this works. 4, 8. 12 or 15, I believe. Exactly 15.
Just 15, no big deal.
Yeah.
So we could be just getting a 2-0 win here. I mean, if you told me at turn 2 when that frog stuck, or turn 3 when it connected, that, Henry is presenting lethal here, I would be very, very shocked. So let's see what the play is here, because if Bernie can even, kill the Master with a Fatal Push, maybe back it up with a counterspell, and then block the Harbinger, then all your mana's unlocked, and then Bernie can really go crazy. That would be truly impressive here, but you got to, of course, kill it before blockers.
Yeah, and this is, a load-bearing Master, right? So you're right. If it gets killed, the frog gets the block, too. So frog eats something, much less damage, kind of a big blowout scenario. So Henry going for the big swing here, and Bernie's going to tap 2 and fire in a Goryo's Vengeance. So can't block yet. Right?
Yeah, this is at end step. We took the damage. So this has got to be a Bernie's end step.
Oh, my apologies. I miscounted it. Must have been 14.
So end step, and this resolves Henry not having any way to interact, but now gets Solitude, and the writing is on the wall there. The Psychic Frog gets to jump. The Atraxa gets in there, and Henry will fall. But, wow, could not have gotten much closer there.
Yeah, that was – woo! All right, pretty big swing there, and we saw though that the clock on Henry's side really, kind of trying to push the frogs, push the blockers. A lot of reliance on these island wall creatures.
Yes.
So does that change how Bernie approaches the game?
Not too much. I don't think so. I would think if all the Thoughtseizes weren't in before, they would be now. Maybe Spell Snare as well to counter one of these 2-drops on the draw. But once again, it all comes down to that Aether Vial aspect of the deck. Bernie hasn't seen them. Bernie also doesn't have access to the list, so maybe they're not even in. So if I'm Bernie and I haven't seen them at all, I'm still going to act as if they're not there, because it is a possibility that these Merfolk decks side them out. I kind of doubt it, but you never know. Especially on the play, though, I bet Henry leaves them all in.
Also, Wrath of the Skies there is a pretty ugly one for the Aether Vial plan.
It really is. And Wrath of the Skies, when Bernie is going to be on the draw, might be a little bit too slow as well.
Okay. And then the Stern Scoldings on Henry's side on the play are also looking a little better too, right?
I don't know. I think they look amazing on the draw because you get to kind of break serve. You get to leave that one open. On the play, I could see a world where Henry just goes all in on the aggressive plan, maybe has a couple dismembers, but I still think they're probably good enough. But that's the tough part about sideboarding against Esper Reanimator. It plays 2 game plans, so which one do you want to be prepared for?
All right, FF Freaks, little bro. Talk to me about this next Magic set.
Oh, man, yeah, absolutely. This set is so very exciting. Like you said, me and my brother, our first Magic Online account was Final Fantasy Freak and Final Fantasy Freak's little bro. So this was the game that I played nonstop until I learned about Magic. And then, that kind of took up most of my time. But an incredible set. It looks like a lot of fun. Go to starcitygames.com/MTG-FIN to be able to pre-order some stuff. It is just really awesome. I actually got a chance to play Limited already, being an ambassador for the set. And it is so very fun. A nice, slow, grindy Limited set so far, which I think me and you really, really love. Having time where a Limited set, you're not dead extremely fast, is definitely what I love to play.
That's awesome. Yeah, looking forward to that for sure. And that's going to be next week and the week after Final Fantasy. Let's do it.
Pre-release coming up, next week already, right?
Yep.
I'll be at my LGS, which happens to be Star City Games.
What a coincidence.
Yes.
All right, so Henry on a mulligan here, going down to 6. Look at Bernie's happy with his hand. And Henry on the play here. I mean, I would think that Henry's still feeling pretty good in the play here, right? Even with the mulligan.
I would think so. Yeah, I think as long as Henry doesn't play against Ocelot, Pride, and a Johnny, I would be thinking the fish feel pretty good. But if you play against those, there's a chance your fish can get cooked.
Fish sticks.
All
right,
it's lunchtime for us. So, yeah.
Probably not having fish sticks, but we'll see. Nothing is set in stone yet. So.
Your palate isn't that advanced, so I can see you on some fish sticks. Absolutely.
All right.
That's true for both of us. We get a lot of cheeseburgers and mac and cheese and pizza.
that is true. Now I'm hungry. Thank you, Corey. I appreciate that.
You're welcome, buddy.
All right. So, happy to look at a new 7 here. And think about if we're putting 1 back. It looks pretty reasonable, right?
Yeah, we got an Aether Vial. We got some lands. It looks like a Harbinger is going to the bottom, which would kind of lead me to believe there was another one hidden in there. And there we go. Something that was not seen from Bernie for the other turns. So Vial's great. The more you mulligan, though, the worse Vial gets. And if you ever draw Vial 2 when you're mulligan, you're like, all right, this sucks.
Yeah, I was spoiled as a Goblin player because in Goblins, the second Vial's great.
Yeah,
But definitely in these decks that aren't drawing as many cards, you're totally right. So,
yeah, and there was some Merfolk builds where you're trying to play a lot more card advantage-y stuff. This is not the case for this one. This is an aggressive Merfolk deck that is playing almost like a tempo deck. 4 Sink into Stupors are in this list too, as a good land and the ability to tempo your opponent out.
All right, so we see second land of pass from Henry. Into a Surveil land for Bernie. And the Vial and the somewhat flash element of Henry's deck does allow for a much more dynamic game, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so Surveil bins a Goyro's Vengeance to the wrong side of the combo on that Surveil end.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, you put Gristlebrand in there, you feel like an absolute god.
Yep. And we see, all right, there's the Frog into 2 open mana.
Okay.
Response is a Tide Shaper and a Flare of Denial. So build your own Force of Will.
Okay.
Quite a few pieces.
Stern Scolding would have looked better there, admittedly, but and that was the draw. Stern Scolding was the card on top there. But hey, if there's Frog too, this looked really nice.
Yeah, Scolding has some pretty good value here. So no land from Henry, which is honestly I think good for Henry's hand, right?
I think so too. Yep. And I think that is Frog too.
Response.
Okay, maybe that wasn't Stern Scolding.
I'm going to guess it wasn't.
Yeah. Or Henry is really, really ready to go for Psychic Frog 3.
Yeah, so here's the Harbinger, and that is backbreaking. Any basics over there, Bernie?
Or Solitude.
Yep.
Now it's Solitude and a Dream, or trying to top deck one of these basics. But hey, even if you top deck the Swamp, most of the time you need to trigger Revolt for Fatal Push. So this Harbinger could easily get it. Never mind.
Okay. There are 4 Solitudes of the list, so that is a pretty good answer. So both players trading pitch spells back and forth. Here's a Tainted Indulgence. Draw 2, discard 1. Looks like Henry says that's okay.
And now Henry only has 1 card in hand. And it's probably not Stern Scolding. I think I was wrong on that one.
Yeah, the 2-for-1 exchanges and the force effects are a lot tougher when you mulligan, also tougher on the play.
Yep, really brutal, but hey, I mean, you got to do what you got to do. Harbinger at home?
Yeah, not quite a lockout. We see a Godless Shrine to Godless Island here, so no white for Bernie yet, but more important, there's black mana, which is the important part. And we see, here comes the Goyros. Looks like the target is off screen, unfortunately, but we're going to find out what it is.
So unless it's Flare of Denial number 3, I don't think there's a single way.
Henry's out.
Yeah.
Henry's, you know what? I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Got up, left feature match area, doesn't want to play anymore.
He's going to get lunch a little early. Just says, you know what? I'll pick up these cards a little bit later. No big deal.
I'm done. See you later.
Yeah, I wonder what he is trying to think about. The only thing that I'm thinking is, like, we're going to flash in a Tishana's Tidebinder, and if you still sacrifice the creature. I think that's probably what it is. Nothing else makes too much sense to me. Or does the Goryos give it haste? Or, like that kind of question with Tidebinder is the only thing that would make sense right now for interaction. If he comes back to the table and just Flare of Denials it, I'm out of here too, okay?
All right, it's if he comes back to the table.
True, okay.
All right. Emery's back. Here's Atraxa. Here's the Vial. And there it is. Well, good call, Corey. There's a Tidebinder on the Atraxa trigger. Yeah. So this would, of course, remove the 10-card ability. As you were saying, Judge Cole was definitely about this. Does it still have haste? Does it still go away? I'm going to assume it's going to go away because that would be pretty risky to give your opponent Atraxa, even if you don't get the cards.
Yeah.
This Mega Baneslayer is still quite good against Merfolk.
Totally agree with you. And, Jim, I am going to start just saying words and stalling until end step till we see where this Atraxa goes. I think that is the – I would think it still does get sacked, though, but I'm not 100% either.
I would agree on that.
Yeah.
But Tidebinder, whenever you're removing abilities and adding abilities and doing layer stuff, things get a little weird. So,
and there they are confirming. Does it still get sacrificed? Because I would assume that's a delayed trigger, And goes to the yard. And hey, if this is the case, Tidebinder just straight up countered Goryo's Vengeance, and it put a clock on. So. Truly fantastic.
Yeah, this is great. Henry's in a low resource game, but 5 power in play. Play it off the top. Needs a little more to go right here, but Bernie's also a little landlight too. So we see a draw here from Henry, going to get in for 5 damage. Bernie missed the land drop last turn, which does mean that a lot of good cards in hand, hopefully.
Yep.
But down at 12, has time.
But does not get to Goryo's Vengeance back that Atraxa. And that's the thing with this Reanimator deck that is a bit of a struggle is, once the creature gets exiled from your graveyard, you have to have a setup turn to put it back in there, and then you have to have the Goryos.
How about plan B? Just put a Frog in play.
Frog.
Yep, so Psychic Frog from Bernie, and that's going to stop the offense from Henry. Plays a Mutavault, has to just pass. So now we're in the Frog zone, and question here is, can Frog get in and start trying to draw cards? Does it have to play defense?
Yeah, that will be the interesting aspect. Now, the fact that Bernie has missed a lot of land drops, it's got to lead me to believe that there's still plenty of stuff to be doing. But, the Esper Reanimator deck is not perfect. It's a lot of A plus B style of combo. It's not necessarily a combo deck by any means, but you need to have a little bit of both aspects of your deck. If you have all the giant creatures, your deck looked really bad. If you have all Goryos, no big creatures, same case. So we will see.
All right, well, good news for Bernie here is this End-Step Surveil stayed on top. So 2 mana tapped, 3 mana tapped. And the follow-up here is a Ketramos. And
wow,
not 7 cards in exile yet, but that Psychic Frog can do a pretty good job there, right?
Yeah, that is a combo right there. Psychic Frog being able to exile some cards in your graveyard to give it flying. Not only do you draw a card, you lose a life, but you can do that a couple of times and turn on Ketramos. So Ketramos can easily attack next turn. It can it can easily block this turn as well.
Yeah, so once again, Henry kind of feeling the squeeze here from card quality. Of a synergy, the creatures of his deck are not as exciting, but there's Master of the Pearl Trident. That's the card that Henry needs to push through.
One of the very few cards that Henry needs right now. And, hey, this is a large attack. This is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Island Walk coming in. And Bernie can, if we don't have anything, just take this. But if he does have an interaction like a Solitude, the game's over because we get to exile enough cards in the yard to be able to block with Ketramos that it's just the meanest 2-for-1 possible. But that's not the case. So, one thing that I think Bernie had to do was exile cards during Henry's turn.
Right, so Ketramos only triggers and loses the life and draws the card on your turn.
Yeah.
And that brings you to a spot where fetch land's dead, Ketramos is dead, cards can't go away. Is this, it can't even be Wrath of the Skies, right? There's only one white source.
Yeah, only one white source.
That's an awesome draw from Henry. I mean, like, just shoving in there, recognizing that, you know, I'm down a bit here, I got to get things going, this engine's coming online. Great stuff.
So if that was the case where Bernie didn't have any interaction there, I would have loved to get that frog in there because you don't need both creatures back if your opponent, you know, if you're afraid of an island walking creature. The 1/4/4 lifelinker would negate the Mutavault, the Tidebinder, and the other Merfolk, excuse me. So there was no reason to leave back frog there if you didn't have an answer already. So
right, Henry didn't have the master. But you got to plan for worst case scenario.
You got to plan for it. And Bernie's already got the rest of the battlefield locked up with Ketramos. So I guess it could have been the same thing like last game where, you know, you run into another way to tap down the Ketramos and then the attack looks a little brutal. So understandable from Bernie, I suppose.
All right, so Frog gets in here. We see a draw, and Bernie needs a miracle. You know, 1 life. If it was 2 life or 3 life, there'd be a lot more room for error. But
yeah,
a lot of Bernie's cards just don't work at 1 life. Tap it to.
Tainted Indulgence, it looks like.
It's kind of similar to game 1, where it was just, you know, all right, then this last tournament 1, got to draw, got to draw, got to draw. Didn't really get there. So.
But if Bernie can find, I mean, now it's kind of Solitude or nothing. Like, if you can Solitude on the Pearl Trident and then block with Ketramos, you actually net a life there. But
nope,
no.
Not going to have it. So Henry Treadway takes it down. Merfolk, kind of an awesome picture of just like these scrappy little Merfolk, you know, not the most popular deck lately. And they're certainly less powerful in a vacuum than cards like Ketramos.